Welcome to the 2018 Great Gatsby Gala, benefiting the restoration and preservation of the historical Beard Congregational Church. Good evening. Tonight we will take you on a journey through the history of the nationally recognized Beard Congregational Church from the time it was only a vision to its present state, then into the plans for its future. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing all slaves in Confederate-controlled areas. Most slaves in border states were freed by state action, including Francis and Robert Dozier. Freedom from a Kentucky plantation forced the Doziers to seek work and a life for their family. They chose to leave Kentucky and migrate south. We must assume that images like these resonated in the minds and memories of many freed slaves, questions galore regarding what next, what now. The old folks at home, one of the photos of African Americans as juxtaposed by Johnston, is described in the book Samuel Armstrong and Folklore at the Hampton Institute as an elderly couple shown in their rude surroundings with only functional kettles and earthenware lining the mantel. This photo was used by students at Hampton Institute to call out the despairing difference between that of the educated and the uneducated. As we travel further into the lives of the founders, we will all agree that they each had moments of reflection similar to this one. Each founder used the types of situations to propel them forward. The photo on the left, based on a painting by artist Henry W. Herrick, depicts a slave family and visitors in their cabin gathered around a Union soldier as he reads the proclamation from a newspaper. A torch held up by a boy illuminates both the newspaper and the reactions to this portentous announcement, which run the gamut from astonishment and jubilation to uncertainty and prayerfulness. As a result of this significant event in U.S. history, Francis and Robert migrated from the Kentucky plantation where they had been enslaved for the majority of their lives. They headed south in search of work and a place to continue raising their family, while many free slaves chose to go north to places like New York and Chicago in search of equality, acceptance, and better paying jobs. Here's a fun fact. The first American car made was the Duryea, built in 1893 by the Duryea Motor Wagon Company. The Duryea Motor Wagon was among the first standardized automobiles and among the first powered by gasoline. This is a reminder that the car was not invented until 30 years after the abolishment of slavery and the migration of the Dozier family. The traveling route taken by the Doziers from Kentucky to Louisiana was a treacherous, dangerous, and strenuous journey through several southern states. Whether by overcrowded trains, horse and carriage, or by foot, the trails were dangerous for freed slaves throughout the South. Initially, the couple landed in Avery Island, Louisiana, whereas many of us know that for over 140 years, the McElhenney Company has grown its red peppers and manufactured its signature hot sauce on Avery Island. Some of you may have even spent a few summers picking peppers for extra money. Some of you only lasted one day. Regardless, this was believed to be the first known employment of the Doziers in Louisiana. They soon after settled here in Erath, Louisiana. Through their union, they had 10 children: Adeline, Mary, Sally, Frank, Pinky, Lizzie, Willie, Henry, Arthur, and Libby. Because slaves were not allowed to legally marry, their union was officially recognized circa 1878. The birth dates of 3 of their 10 children are not recorded because of limited documentation on the births of African American children, generally birthed with the assistance of family or a midwife. Frances Dozier was born into slavery in 1851, but excelled herself and her family far beyond the chains that bound her. With her natural instincts and intelligence, Frances became a midwife to the community. Because of her skills as a midwife, she performed numerous deliveries for both African American and non-African American families in the local community. As parents of 10 children, Frances and her husband sought opportunities to improve the quality of life for their family. Although she never received a formal education, Mrs. Dozier was truly a visionary that understood the power of an education and had an unshakable faith in God. Unfortunately, there are no known photographs of Frances Dozier. Robert Dozier was employed at a local lumber yard. Like his wife, Robert wore several hats. Once he became a freed slave, he became an expert carpenter, devoted husband, doting father, and a visionary that also understood the power of an education and who also had an unshakable faith in God. Although of poor quality, this is the only known photograph of Robert Dozier. Psalms 16:3 says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plan." We can only imagine that this was a verse that the Doziers lived by in their daily lives. A dream, some said an impossible dream. Robert and Frances Dozier were the rare couple who dared to dream beyond the possible to the impossible. Their vision of educating their children at a time when prejudice was prevalent throughout the world, they knew, was monumental. At a time where education was not the norm for Southern African American children, but the exception. Two generations preceding Dr. Martin Luther King's stand for civil rights and his famous words, "I have a dream," Robert and his beautiful wife Frances Dozier had a dream. Their dream would be considered a basic right today. They envisioned providing education to their children and grandchildren. Let's continue our journey through the relationship of church and school. There have been plenty of legal arguments about the separation of church and school. However, for Beard Congregational Church and the Dozier family, the relationship between church and school was a dependent, collaborative, and inclusive relationship. Around 1911, the Doziers hired Mrs. Grace Milton Neal as an educator to enter their home and teach their own children, as well as African American children in the area. Mrs. Gracie Milton Neal was a resident of Abbeville. The home is located next to the historical Beard Congregational Church and currently is inhabited by Mr. Jerome Hebert, a great-grandson of the Doziers. The home is a simple wood shotgun-style home on north side of Granger Street and still retains most of its original charm and character. She offered the children the advantage of learning in a safe, comfortable environment. During this time, Mrs. Neal lived in the Dozier home and commuted back home to Abbeville on weekends. Each morning, Mrs. Dozier would transform her home into a classroom by leaning the bed against the wall, creating a makeshift classroom. This routine continued until 1916, when it was decided that the Beard Congregational Church would serve the dual purpose of a school and a church. During this time, church and school were deeply intertwined. Mrs. Alberta Price of New Orleans was the first teacher in the church classroom. Over the next 25 years, Mrs. Gracie Neal of Abbeville, Harold Gilbert of New Iberia, and Lizzie Lee Brown of Erath, respectively, taught the local children in the church structure. Lizzie Lee Brown, who was also a granddaughter of Robert and Frances Dozier, continued as an educator as the church made the transition to R.F. Dozier Elementary, where she remained until her death in 1959. As families sought education for their children, the capacity of the church was at a maximum. Student enrollment increased to fill the church on Monday through Friday as the gospel filled the pews on Sundays. By 1941, the church could no longer accommodate the expanding class size. At this time, concerned parents approached the Vermilion Parish School Board for assistance. The plot of land where Dozier Elementary currently sits was purchased for the colored elementary school site in August of 1941. The school board purchased 1 acre of land from Philip Richard for $1,000. Construction of the small building was estimated at $890. making the total investment $1,890, which in comparison is less than the price of the platinum sponsored table here tonight. The doors to Robert and Frances Dole Elementary School were officially opened with a single two-room wooden school building. Due to limited space, the building could only house grades 1 through 6. To continue their education, the older children were routed via bus to schools in Abbeville and New Iberia. Reverend B.T. Witt of Lake Charles became the first principal of Robert and Frances Dozier Elementary School in 1942 and remained in that capacity until the school closed its doors in 1968. For his dedication and hard work, he earned $75 a month. This devoted educator was determined to offer his students the benefits of a good education. Students who recall their time at Dozier from 1942 to 1968 recall the large cars Reverend Witt drove and his no-nonsense approach to education. Additional land purchases were made in May and November of 1948 from the widow and the heirs of Philip Richard for $7,460 and granted to the Vermilion Parish School Board a total of 4.69 acres of land. By the early 1950s, it was apparent that additional space was needed for the growing student body. Construction cost of a new brick school for grades 1 through 8 was estimated at $237,000. With the assistance of the Vermilion Parish School Board under the leadership of G.I. Leday, Superintendent, First Ward School Board member Ulysses LeBlanc, who was also the president of the school board, and ERATH representative, the plan included 4 classrooms plus a cafeteria building erected by MGL Construction and Company. Look closely, you may even recognize some of the earliest students of R.F. Dozier. Bearing the proud name R.F. Dozier Elementary, this new school opened in 1954 in honor of Robert and Frances Dozier. The original brick structure still exists as part of the present school. For the next 14 years, Reverend Witt and his dedicated faculty were committed to providing their students with the best possible education. The R.F. Dozier Elementary School closed its doors in May of 1968 to integrate with ERATH High School, which accommodated grades 1 through 12. The controversial issue of school desegregation had entered an era where it became possible for all students to embark on an equal education. The doors of the school remained closed from 1968 to 1969. In August of 1969, the building reopened under the umbrella of the Vermilion Parish Follow-Through Program and provided education to students of all ethnicities. The program remained in existence until 1971. At the beginning of the 1972-1973 school year, the building was rededicated as R.F. Dozier Elementary with an addition. The school, commonly referred to as Dozier Elementary, held classes for 1st through 3rd graders. In 1974, kindergarten classes were added to the school. The original cornerstone still exists as part of the present school. In the 1972-1973 school year, 2 of the great-granddaughters of Robert and Frances Dozier, Virginia Ann Pelet and Jeanette Dixon Pelet, served on the faculty of the school, as well as former student of the first Vermilion Parish iteration of Dozier, Miss Evola Mickey Antoine. All 3 worked at Dozier until their health failed them and were forced to retire. If you look closely, you may recognize some other outstanding ERATH educators. In 1912, Beard Congregational Church was built as a place of worship. The structure was a simple wood A-frame building. Robert Dozier and his son-in-law, L.C. Jesse, spearheaded the construction of the little wooden church, which was also constructed by the local craftsmen and carpenters who would worship there. The location selected was next to the home of Frances and Robert Dozier's home. This location was close in proximity to several other African American families, like the Pelets, the Greens, the Broussards, and many others. The address was 402 Granger Street in Erath, Louisiana, which is where the structure still exists today. Reverend James A. Herod partnered with the Dozier family as the founding fathers and mother of Beard Congregational Church. Reverend Herod leveraged the knowledge that he had gained from his dual roles as pastor and educator at St. Mary's Congregational Church in Abbeville, Louisiana. The model was repeated in Erath with the construction of the Beard Congregational Church. He was a nonviolent force who served as a preacher and a teacher to his community. He was born in Tennessee, but sent to Louisiana by the American Missionary Association to attend Straight College and then New Orleans University, now Dillard University in New Orleans. Because of his remarkable commitment to educating and ministering to the African American community, his name still garners respect and admiration. L.C. Jesse took pride in the little church on Granger Street, as he not only assisted in the planning and construction of the church, but he also led the congregation in prayer so emotional that it drew churchgoers into a Holy Spirit fit, shouting and dancing up and down the aisles of the little Spirit-filled church. He was known about the town as a small-framed man with a serious demeanor. Mr. Jesse garnered respect wherever he went and was known to carry a small .22 caliber handgun in his pocket at all times. He was fiercely protective of his wife, sister, and children, but rarely shared very much about his upbringing. This quiet man would walk about town, visiting relatives, delivering bounty from his abundant gardens, and in exchange, receive a cup of dark roast coffee with just a yay amount of coffee and an abundance of sugar. Reverend B.T. Witt was a hard-working, well-dressed man who wore dual hats and served as both pastor and teacher at the church. He delivered many soul-stirring sermons and songs of praise from the pulpit of the church on Granger Street. On Sunday morning, Reverend Witt would raise the roof off the church. Following Reverend Witt's footsteps were Reverend Belair of New Iberia and Dr. Harold J. Simmons of Delcombe, Louisiana. The church remained operational until the 1970s. In both the 80s and the 1990s, the church was open for memorial service for several descendants of the Dozier family. The church was subleased for a short time in the 2000s and managed under the name of Jacob's Ladder.
What opportunities are awaiting you in your life? Stuff that's getting ready to open up. But all God is waiting on you is to realize your own potential. Y'all ain't saying nothing. What opportunities are getting ready to open for you, and all God is saying, realize the potential that you have.
While Beard Congregational Church has weathered the storm of time, it's 106 years old now, and it is in need of some updating and restoration. The original structure remains intact, but just like your home or other properties, over time the physical building is showing signs of its age. As we discuss the restoration and next steps for the church, we want to take a moment to honor 4 individuals for their dedication to preserving our story by sharing the history of the church. The late Mrs. Alice Dozier Davy, granddaughter of Francis and Robert Dozier. The late Ruby Lee Azar, granddaughter of Francis and Robert Dozier. Miss Stacy Bodan, former Vermilion Parish educator and local historian. Mrs. Dana Dore Como, great-great-granddaughter of Francis and Robert Dozier. In the summer of 2015, Dana Como and Denise Everett created a presentation and petition to the National Park Service's National Register of Historical Places to list the church on the National Register of Historical Places. The two traveled to Baton Rouge to present the history and artifacts of the church. In August 2015, notification was received that the church was accepted and would be listed on the National Register, a remarkable accomplishment for a first-time submission. The church was officially listed as of October 2015. On October 7, 2016, Mayor John Earl LeBlanc of the town of Erath unveiled the R.F. Dozier Street which runs directly behind the church. The unveiling was coordinated with the 2016 Dozier family reunion. It allowed for the oldest descendant of Robert and Frances Dozier, Mrs. Alice Dozier David, to participate in this historic event. Mrs. David passed a short time afterward, but she shared with everyone she encountered her memories, passion, and love for the church, the school, and the family. We have been fortunate to recently have media coverage from our local news outlets, including the Daily Advertiser, the Abbeville Meridional, and Channel 3 KATC. We were especially honored to be featured by our Mistress of Ceremonies, Laura Levine, on Channel 10 KLFY. The Restoration Committee is made up of descendants of the union of Robert and Frances Dozier, great-great-granddaughters Dana Como, Denise Everett, Andre Dozier, Ethel Bernard Ambrose, and Mary Morrison, great-great-great-granddaughters Shelley Lewis and Samantha January. The future for the historic landmark is to rebirth the physical structure. The goal is to allow not only those who are descendants of Robert and Frances Dozier to enjoy the historical significance of the sanctuary, but also to those who attended the church, enrolled in any iteration of Dozier schools, or have ties to the town of Erath, or those who just want to enjoy a story of perseverance. We ask that you continue to support the Beard Congregational Church restoration and revitalization by visiting us at the website www.beardcc.org, continuing to support events sponsored by Beard Restoration Committee like tonight's Great Gatsby Gala, reach down into your pockets and participate in the silent auctions, 50-50 raffle, and consider an online donation. Support us at the bar, but remember to always drink sensibly or assign a designated driver. We ask that as you post to social media tonight, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., that you add the hashtags, hashtag 2018 BGGG or hashtag Beard Church. Lastly, volunteers are needed for services and or supplies to bring the church back to its glory years. Thank you for your support. At this time, we would like to again welcome you to the 2018 Great Gatsby Gala, celebrating and benefiting the historical Beard Congregational Church.